I myself, as a young man, recall going to Sandy Point, with blueberries, going to Sandy Point with bake apples, going to Sandy Point with cranberries, going to Sandy Point with caribou meat, and actually peddling from door to door. And sometimes we bartered, but sometimes we sold for cash. The Europeans very quickly realized how important that these species and the various berries that could be collected would play in their overall survival. And therefore the trade continued with the English Europeans as it was with the French livyers that were there. There was a barter relationship, there was a good relationship there. And surprisingly, that relationship continued right up to probably as late as probably only like 3-4 years before the demise of the settlement on Sandy Point.
The coming of the railway in 1904 was the beginning of the decline for Sandy Point. The collapse of the herring fishery in the 1920s was another severe blow. By 1973, the community was all but gone.
Why did I move up? Because the water kept coming up and it was getting harder, and Isaac was working on the job on the base then. I have went there a couple of times, but I couldn't even find a house for this too. But then I kind of figured out where it was. So I figured we had a cellar, and I went from that.
While you're living there wasn't a perception of Sandy Point dying. It was. You were living there and things were normal. This was your life, and you didn't. You can look back in retrospect now and see how things were changing, but as a child growing up there, you did childish things, and you just lived day to day, and the future wasn't something you really thought about. You just lived for today. Maybe for 2 or 3 years of my first schooling, we had a permanent teacher. After that, we were having trouble getting teachers to stay. So just myself and my sister Diana at home, and there were a twin, Alice and Marion Noseworthy, that Mom had been looking after for the father, Jack Noseworthy, who lived and worked in Stephenville. The four of us, Mom taught the four of us around the kitchen table, and as well there were a couple of other children who came and then Mom looked after as well. So I think there was about 6 of us around the kitchen table. That's where we spent our winter, getting our education. It was after that that Mom realized that she wanted to be an educated person herself, wanted to have us educated, decided, well, she was going back in the teaching profession. So in 1950, we left Sandy Point, and she got a school in Black Duck, and we went to school in there. So that was the period when my existence on Sandy Point from a 12-month period came to an end. We always went back every summer and kept doing that back until well into the late 50s.
Spring, I guess, of '63, when university was finished, I got a job on Sandy Point teaching in the school there. From when the university closed in, say, late April until the end of the school year, because they hadn't had any teacher over there for the full year. I was married to Mira Hewlin from Cartyville, so I used to stay in Cartyville over the weekend, and I got the loan of her first cousin's old truck, and I used to drive to St. George's, and Al Maservi used to come over in his old boat over to St. George's and pick me up on Monday morning, and I'd go over to Sandy Point and spend a week, and then Friday evening I'd come over across the Tickle with Al, of course stop into the tavern on the wharf, have a whatever, jump in my old truck and come to Cartyville. I don't honestly remember how many students I had. I'd say there's probably 15 or so. But I believe it was only up to grade 5. I think Al had 5 kids that were in school. But I stayed at Al's during the week. I don't think there was anybody that taught there afterwards. I couldn't be sure of that. But I claim to be the last teacher. Whether the claim is correct or not, I'm not prepared to say. I usually claim things that are not quite true sometimes.
Today, Peter Colson's son Clyde is coming home for the last time, and Sandy Point will take him in. His nephew Edwin Abbott, his niece Maureen Bellamy, and her husband Rick Bellamy are bringing Clyde's ashes back to the family land. Reverend Gwendolyn Butler, granddaughter of Reverend E.A. Butler, is with them and will perform the interment rite.
Waking will rise of me up, and in my body I shall see God.